A heart once soft can quickly turn into a blade of cold, hard iron when pushed to the breaking point. Witness the sharp edge of revenge as it cuts through the lies and settles the final score. Click subscribe now to see the ultimate price of a broken promise.
Orchestrated fresh revenge narrative with new characters, avoiding all restricted names. Orchestrated fresh revenge narrative with new characters, avoiding all restricted names. 5 days before my sister's wedding, my mother called to tell me I wasn't in it. Not a bridesmaid, not a reader, not even. And this was the part she said fast, like ripping tape off a box, at the rehearsal dinner. I stood in my kitchen, still wearing my work boots, steel toes scuffed gray, a smear of cutting oil on my forearm that I hadn't scrubbed off yet. And I listened to my mother explain that my sister and her fiancé had decided to keep the wedding party tight. His side, she said, was a certain kind of family, Old Pittsburgh. The fiancé's grandfather had a wing of a hospital named after him, and my sister was worried. My mother used the word worried the way you'd use it about a health scare. That having a welder in the bridal lineup might read as, and here she searched for it, off-brand for the day. My name is Maren Doyle. I was 32 years old that spring, and I'd spent the last decade learning how to take a thing that wanted to fall down and make it stand up forever. I run a shop. I cut steel, I forge it, I weld it, I make staircases that outlive the people who walk on them. And what my family didn't know, what none of them knew, because not one of them had ever once asked the right question, was that the building my sister's fiancé was about to be celebrated for, the project that was going to put his name in the magazines, was sitting half-finished in my fabrication bay. His name was on the renderings. Mine was on the welds. In 9 days, the whole thing they thought they understood about me was going to come apart in a banquet hall in front of 400 people. But that morning, standing in my kitchen, I just said, "Okay, Mom, I understand." And I did understand. I understood exactly what it was. The pattern started when I was 19. We were at the dinner table in the house I grew up in Mount Lebanon. The table where every Sunday from my entire childhood we'd eaten pot roast and discussed who was doing well. My father had his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. My mother was rearranging the green beans on her plate so it would look like she'd eaten more than she had. My sister, 3 years younger, was telling everyone about the debate team. I said I wasn't going back to Pitt in the fall. I said I'd applied to a welding program at the community college and gotten in, and I was starting in the winter term. My mother set down her fork, not slammed it, set it down gently, which was worse. "Welding," she said. "The way you'd say a diagnosis you'd been afraid of." "Structural and pipe," I said. "There's a shortage. People are retiring. The guy who runs the program says I'll have offers before I finish." "Linda's daughter just got into nursing school," my mother said. "Not that's interesting. Not tell me why. Just somebody else's kid, doing the right kind of thing." My father took his glasses off and rubbed the bridge of his nose and said, "Maren, that's awfully hard on a body. You're a bright girl." My sister, 16, looked at me like I'd announced I was joining the circus and said, "You're going to be, like, a welder? In a mask? Seriously?" My mother reached across and put her hand over mine. Her hand was cool and dry and smelled like the lotion she'd used my whole life. "Sweetheart," she said, "we just want you to have it easier than we did." She'd been a school administrator for 26 years. My father managed a parts department at a Ford dealership until his knees gave out. They'd worked hard and they'd done the thing their generation believed in, which was to push their kids up and out toward desks, toward clean hands, toward what they called something to be proud of. They thought college was a ladder and trade was a hole. They couldn't picture it any other way, because they'd never been shown one. So they supported me technically. The way you support a decision you're privately sure is a mistake. For 10 years, every Sunday dinner, they asked my sister about her career. She'd gone into brand marketing for a bank downtown. Then a luxury hotel group, blazers and lanyards and conferences in Scottsdale. How's the new account? Did you get the team lead title? Are they flying you out? And every Sunday they asked me, how's work going, honey? The same flat, kind, closed question you'd ask about the weather. They never asked what I was building. They never asked what a day was like. They asked, how's work? And then they pivoted to my sister's promotion before I'd finished answering. And after a couple of years, I stopped finishing. I got my journeyman certs at 22. I got my AWC certified welding inspector credential at 25. Which is no small thing. There's a whole exam, codes, a part where they hand you defective welds, and you have to find every flaw. I mentioned it at dinner. My mother said, that's nice, and asked my sister if her boss had liked the rebrand deck. I stopped bringing it to the table after that. I kept the certs in a folder in a drawer and I kept building. I started my own shop at 27. I'd been working 5 years for a fabricator in Carrick, a good old union outfit, and the owner was getting ready to retire and didn't have anybody to take it over. And I had $11,000 saved and a head full of nerve. I bought his oldest TIG machine, leased a 2-bay garage out by the river in Lawrenceville, and registered the business. I didn't name it after myself. The old-timers in this town will tell you a shop with a woman's name on the door gets bit lower, gets the door talked down on the phone, gets the is the owner around sweetheart treatment. So I named it Iron Hill Forge. Sounded like it had been there 100 years. Sounded like a man you'd never have to meet. I told my parents I'd started a company. My father said, your own shop, huh? My mother said, just be careful, Maren. Most of those little businesses don't make it. Then she asked my sister whether the hotel group was sending her to the conference in Miami. Year 1, it was me and a part-time guy named Thomas, a fabricator about my father's age who'd been laid off when a bridge contract dried up. Thomas had no family in the city. His were all back in El Paso, and he could lay a weld bead so clean it looked machined. He stayed. Year 1, we did 14 jobs. Handrails, fire escapes, a custom range hood for a restaurant on Butler Street that put a photo of it on their wall. Year 2, I hired 2 more. We did a steel and glass canopy for a brewery and a spiral stair for a loft conversion that landed me 3 referrals. Year 3 was the break. A developer doing adaptive reuse, old industrial buildings into apartments, gave me a $100,000 package, stair towers, mezzanine rails, the whole guts of a former pencil factory. I was terrified and I was ready, and we came in on time. And the developer started handing my number to everyone he golfed with. At dinner that year, I said the shop was doing well. My mother said, that's wonderful, honey. My father said, make sure you're putting money away for retirement. My sister said her fiancé, they'd just gotten engaged, was the lead architect on a project that was going to change the whole South Side. And my mother put both hands flat on the table like she'd heard the second coming. I should tell you about the fiancé, because this is where the 2 halves of my life, the one my family saw and the one they didn't, started running toward each other on the same track. My sister got engaged to an architect named Sebastian Vance. Vance plus Holloway, his firm. He came from money the way some people come from a city, like it was just the air he'd always breathed. He was charming in the practiced way of men who've never had a door not open for them. My mother adored him on sight. The first time he came to Sunday dinner, she used the good plates, the ones with the gold rim, the ones we weren't allowed to touch as kids. He talked about his vision for the city, about honoring the bones of old buildings, and my father nodded along like he understood, and my sister glowed. He asked me what I did that first dinner. I said I worked in metal fabrication. He said, oh, like sculpture? And I said, like staircases. And he said, huh, neat, and turned back to my mother, and that was the deepest anyone in that family ever got into my actual life. Like sculpture? Huh, neat. He never asked the name of my shop. Nobody did. Why would they? The welder was the welder. You didn't ask the whether it's business. So nobody knew. Not when, 8 months before the wedding, Vance plus Holloway's project manager emailed Iron Hill Forge to ask if we could bid the signature feature on his firm's biggest job, the conversion of the old Federal Savings Building downtown, a 1920s bank with marble floors and a vaulted ceiling, into a boutique hotel. The centerpiece was going to be a 40-foot hand-forged feature, stair rising through the old teller hall, plus a sculptural steel screen across the mezzanine, ribbons of blackened steel meant to catch the light. It was the kind of work that doesn't come along twice, the kind that gets photographed. The PM had heard about us from the pencil factory developer. He'd seen our spiral stair in a trade journal. He emailed Iron Hill Forge, not Maren Doyle. We met on site, me in my Carhartts and steel toes, hard hat, tape measure clipped to my belt, directing my crew. The PM treated me, at first, like the site lead, somebody supervising. I let him. I didn't correct it. It wasn't a lie, exactly. I was supervising. I was also the person whose name was on the insurance, the bond, the whole thing. We signed for $290,000, the biggest contract of my life. And here's the part that still makes me laugh in a way that isn't really laughing. Sebastian Vance, my sister's fiancé, the architect of record, the visionary, never once set foot on my shop floor. He worked through his PM and the general contractor. He approved my shop drawings, signed off on the forging details I'd designed, the joint types, the finish, without ever connecting Iron Hill Forge to the welder his fiancé was embarrassed by. He praised the fabricators in his project updates. He told the hotel group the stair was going to be the soul of the building. He had no idea the soul of his building was being beaten out of bar stock by the woman he didn't want at his rehearsal dinner. I didn't connect it either, not at first. And I want to be honest about that, because it sounds impossible until you live inside it. I don't talk to my sister about my projects. We barely talk at all. And when we do, it's surface. How's the shop? Fine. How's wedding planning? Busy. I didn't talk to Sebastian beyond 2 dinners. The job came in under the brand name, through a chain of middlemen, the way every real job does. To me, Vance plus Holloway was a client. To my family, the welder was the welder. 2 trains, same track, neither of us looking up. Then the wedding invitations went out, and I wasn't on the list, and my mother made the phone call, and the trains found each other. It was a Tuesday when she called. 5 days out. I'd just come off the shop floor. We'd been finishing the forge work on the bank stair, and my hands were black to the wrist, and my safety glasses had left a clean stripe across my soot-dusted face, so I looked like a raccoon in reverse. She told me about keeping it tight, about his family, about my sister being worried. Worried about what, exactly? I said. I made her say it. A long pause. Then, she just thinks. At a wedding like this with these people, it might be hard to explain what you do. One jotter, you do. Like it was something that happened to me. Like it was a condition. So I'm uninvited, I said. You're not uninvited, my mother said. And the relief was already pouring into her voice because she thought the hard part was over. It's just this one event. We'll do something separate, just us, a nice lunch after the honeymoon. You understand, sweetheart. I knew you'd understand, sweetheart. I knew you'd understand. I understand, I said. I hung up, and I stood in my kitchen, and I didn't cry, and I didn't throw anything. I looked at my hands. There was a fresh burn on the back of one. shiny and pink, where a spark had found the gap above my glove that afternoon. I'd gotten the burn, making the stair her fiancé was going to stand under at his own wedding reception, because the hotel wasn't done. But the bank's teller hall was the venue, and our stair was going to be the backdrop of every photo. I'd known the venue for months. It was a job site to me. I hadn't known it was their wedding. I figured it out an hour later, sitting in the dark, when I pulled up the event details the GC had forwarded, the reception walkthrough, the date, the client contact, and the client contact for the wedding side was my sister's full name. I sat with that for a long time. I could have called my mother back. I could have said, "Do you have any idea what you just did?" I could have told them the whole thing, watched it land, taken the apology in real time. I didn't, because an apology you bully out of someone isn't worth keeping. And because I had a better idea of how this was going to go, and it didn't require me to say a single word. The wedding was on a Saturday in May. The reception was in the teller hall of the old Federal Savings Building, my teller hall, under a stair that wasn't quite finished, draped for the night in fabric and lights so the guests would see only the silhouette of it. I wasn't there. I spent that Saturday at the shop with Thomas, finishing the mezzanine screen, because the hotel's grand opening was 2 weeks out and we were behind. And because I'd rather have been anywhere on earth than at the shop, and there was nowhere else I wanted to be. We ordered pierogies from the place on the corner and ate them off the welding table, and Thomas, who knew the whole story by then, raised his Coke and said, "To family," in a voice as dry as the Allegheny in August, and I laughed for the first time in 5 days. My phone buzzed once that night. A text from my sister, a photo of her and Sebastian on the dance floor, the stair behind them, and the caption, "Wish you could have seen it." Shh. I looked at it for a while. The flash had caught the steel I'd forged. You could see, if you knew where to look, the scroll detail I'd worked out at 2 in the morning 8 weeks earlier. Wish you could have seen it. I'd seen it. I'd made it. I put the phone face down and finished my pierogies. The thing about a job like the Federal Savings Building is that it doesn't just open, it gets celebrated. The hotel group threw a press preview, and 2 weeks after that came the awards. The Allegheny Design Council holds an annual gala. Architects, developers, engineers, the trades that do the showpiece work. 400 people in the ballroom of a downtown hotel, white tablecloths, a stage, a screen. My stair, the Federal Savings Feature Stair, had been entered for the Excellence in Craft Award, the one that goes not to the designer but to the maker. Whoever actually built the thing. I'd been notified 3 weeks earlier that Iron Hill Forge was a finalist. I hadn't told my family. I'd told Thomas, who'd hugged me so hard my back cracked. I drove downtown that night in my truck, parked in the back row, and sat for a minute with the engine running. I was wearing a black suit and a pair of heels I owned for exactly 2 reasons: funerals and this. I'd straightened my hair. In the rear view, I looked like a stranger, somebody's competent older daughter. No soot, no stripe across my face, no burns you could see with the sleeves down. I hated that I'd cleaned up for them. And I had cleaned up for them, even though they didn't know I'd be there. But I had, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I found my table, trade section, near the front. I knew half the room. The electrical foreman from the pencil factory waved. A glass guy I'd subbed bought me a drink. And then, scanning the room the way you do, I found the table that put a stone in my stomach. Vance plus Holloway had a table up front, sponsor level. The Federal Savings Building was the project of the night for the Architecture Awards too. Sebastian was going to be on stage either way. And he'd brought guests. My sister, in a green dress I'd never seen, and next to her, because the project was a family triumph now, because the hotel was his and the wedding had been there. My mother and my father, they had no idea I was in the room. My mother was laughing at something the developer's wife said. My father looked like every father at every formal event, miserable in a tie, checking his watch. My sister had her hand on Sebastian's arm. They were 40 feet away, and they were here to watch him be great, and not one of them looked at the trades tables. Because why would you? They called the Excellence in Craft Award early, before the design honors. The woman presenting it ran the council. She had a way of building suspense that I'd have found unbearable if my pulse hadn't already been somewhere up around my ears. She talked about the difference between drawing a thing and making it. About how the most beautiful detail in the world is just a fantasy until somebody figures out how to actually fabricate it, on time, to code, so it holds the weight of every person who'll ever climb it. The finalists came up on the screen. 3 shops. Iron Hill Forge, second. I watched my sister's table out of the corner of my eye, and I'll tell you the exact moment because I've replayed it 100 times. The screen showed a photo of the stair, her wedding backdrop, and underneath it, the shop name and the lead fabricator. Iron Hill Forge. Maren Doyle, ASWI, Master Fabricator. My sister read it. I watched her read it. I watched her face do the thing a face does when 2 pieces of information that have lived in separate rooms suddenly meet in the hallway. She turned to Sebastian. She said something. He frowned, looked at the screen, and I watched the color leave him. Because he knew the shop name, he'd signed off on Iron Hill's drawings for a year. He just had never put it beside the name Doyle. My mother saw her children's faces change and leaned in. My sister pointed at the screen. My mother looked. And my mother, 61 years old, the good gold rim plates, we just want you to have it easier. Put her hand flat against her chest like something had reached in. This year's Excellence in Craft Award, the presenter said, goes to Iron Hill Forge for the Federal Savings Feature Stair, Maren Doyle. The room clapped. A light found me. I stood up. My legs were not entirely mine, but they did the job, the way legs do. The trades table came up roaring. Somebody pounded my shoulder. The glass guy yelled my name. I walked to the stage, and the walk took me past the front, and I let myself look, once, just once, at the table where my family sat. My mother's hand was still on her chest. My father had gone completely still, the watch forgotten. My sister's mouth was open. And Sebastian was staring at me like a man recalculating his entire understanding of a building he thought he'd designed alone. I took the award. It was heavy, real. A wedge of steel and glass, cool in my hands. I stepped to the microphone. 400 people. I kept it short. Thank you, I said, and my voice came out level, which surprised me. 6 years ago, I started this shop with a used welder and a lease I couldn't really afford. Because I wanted to make things that would still be standing when I'm not. People walk past the work we do every day and never think about who made it stand up. That's fine. That's the job. I paused. I did not look at the front table. I did not need to. But to everyone who saw what this could be before it was anything you could photograph. Thank you for asking who built it. I let that one sit. Thank you for asking who built it. It wasn't for the room. The room didn't know. But I felt the front table hear it. The way you feel heat off a torch before it touches you. I stepped back. The applause came up again. Louder. And I walked off and went back to my table, and somebody put champagne in my hand, and the design award started, and Sebastian won his. And I watched him go up and accept it and not mention the stair once. Cocktail hour. The official program over. The room loosening. People circulating with drinks. I was talking to the council director. She wanted Iron Hill for a museum job. When I saw my mother coming across the floor, fast, my father trailing, My sister behind them looking like she might be sick. Sebastian stayed at the table. My mother stopped in front of me, clutching her little beaded purse with both hands. "Maren," she said, "we had no idea you'd be here." "I know," I said, "you never do." She flinched. My father stepped up beside her. "Maren, honey, why didn't you tell us about any of this?" I looked at him. I thought about 10 years of Sunday dinners. 10 years of housework, sweetheart. The folder of certs in the drawer nobody ever asked to see. "I did tell you," I said. "I told you I started a company. You told me most of them fail. I got an inspector's certification. You said that's nice and asked her about a rebrand." I tipped my head at my sister, who had gone white. "I've told you about the shop at the dinner table for 6 years. You weren't listening. There's a difference between not being told and not wanting to hear." My mother's eyes were wet. "I didn't, Maren. I didn't know it was real. This," she gestured at the award still in my hand. "This is a real business. This." "What did you think it was?" I said quietly. "You thought I swept the floor for a man with a real shop?" Nobody answered. That was the answer. My sister found her voice. "The stair," she said. "At the... That was yours. The stair at my wedding was, you built that." It came out almost accusatory, like I'd done something underhanded by making the most beautiful object in the room she'd shut me out of. "You got married under my staircase?" I said. "Standing in a hall my crew and I rebuilt. And you didn't want me at the rehearsal dinner, because somebody might ask what I do." I wasn't yelling. I want you to understand that. I'd stopped needing to yell years before. I'd already turned in the shop drawings when Mom called to uninvite me. I had a burn on my hand from your reception backdrop while she explained I was off-brand. Sebastian had drifted over by then, hovering at the edge of it, the way men do when they want to be seen managing a situation. "Maren," he said, smooth, recovering. Honestly, this is incredible. The work is, we should talk, professionally. I had no idea Iron Hill was." "You approved my drawings for a year," I said. "You signed my forging details. You told the hotel my stair was the soul of your building." I let that hang. "It is, you're welcome." My sister was crying now. The careful makeup going. "Maren, I'm sorry I never put it together. The name, I swear." "I believe you," I said, and I did. The brand name had done exactly what I'd built it to do. It had let me be judged by the work before anyone could be small about the maker. The irony was that the same shield I'd raised against strangers had hidden me from my own family, and they'd been only too happy to keep their eyes closed. "I believe you didn't connect it. That's the whole problem. You never wanted to know enough to connect anything." I set my champagne down. I had a museum director to call, and a crew opening the shop at 6. "I'm going to go," I said. "Congratulations on the wedding. The stair really did come out well." My mother caught my sleeve at the door. "Not hard, just enough." "Can we take you to dinner?" she said. And her voice cracked clean through. "To celebrate, please. We want to." I looked at her. 61. The lines around her eyes, I didn't remember her getting. A woman who'd spent her whole life believing that clean hands were the same thing as a good life? Who'd wanted her daughters safe so badly she'd never noticed that one of them had built herself a fortress, and the other had built herself a brand. And only one of those would hold up a roof. "No," I said. "But thank you for asking." It was the first time in 10 years one of them had asked me to anything. I wanted her to feel the shape of it. "Not tonight." I drove home with the award on the passenger seat. The dashboard lights came up green. The heater ticked. I sat in my own driveway for a while before I went in. I didn't hear from my sister for 3 weeks, and then it was a card, handwritten, that said more than she'd ever said to my face. My father called the next Sunday, a real call, not a relayed message through my mother, and asked, haltingly, like a man trying a new language, what a day at the shop was actually like. I told him. He listened. At the end he said, I had it wrong, Maren. About what's hard work and what isn't. I think I always knew, watching your hands, I just couldn't. And he didn't finish. And that was all right. My mother and I went for coffee a month after the gala. 40-some minutes at a diner halfway between her house and my shop. She apologized, and it wasn't a clean apology. It had her in it. All her fear and her vanity, and her real, clumsy love. She said she thought she was protecting me and she'd ended up disappearing me. I told her I'd come to Thanksgiving. They hadn't asked yet, I just said it, on conditions. Ask me 2 weeks out and take no for an answer. If anyone makes a joke about what I do, I leave and I don't come back. And I'm bringing Tomas, who doesn't have family in this city and has been with me since the first lease. She said okay to all of it. Quick, like she was afraid I'd add more. Who's Tomas? She asked, and I could see her bracing for a boyfriend. And I said my lead fab. My right hand, the best welder you'll ever meet, and watched her file welder into a new drawer, one that didn't have embarrassing written on it, and reach for the next question instead of the exit. What does he like to eat? She asked. It was a small thing. It was the whole thing. We weren't fixed. I want to be honest about that, because the stories people tell about this kind of night always end with everyone hugging in the rain, and that's not how it goes. My sister and I still talk like people learning each other's names. Sebastian sent me a long professional email. I answered in 2 lines. There are Sundays I still feel the old reflex, the bracing before. How's work, sweetheart, even though nobody asks it that way anymore. But last week my mother called me on a Tuesday, not a Sunday. 2:15 in the afternoon, no occasion. She'd seen a photo somewhere of the museum stair we just topped out, and she wanted to know how I'd gotten the steel to curve like that without it kinking. Which is a real question. A maker's question. The kind that takes knowing something about a person to even ask. I was standing on the shop floor with my glasses up and a fresh burn cooling on my forearm. And I leaned against the bench and I told her about heat and patience, and how you have to work the metal slow. How the whole trick is that you can't force a bend or it cracks. You have to bring it up to temperature and let it want to move. She was quiet a second. Then she said, That sounds like it took you a long time to learn. It did, I said. I used to think the fire was the thing trying to wreck me. 10 years of it, all that heat, all that pain told I was less. Turns out the fire was just the part of the process where you find out whether you'll crack or bend. I didn't crack. And I don't bend for them anymore. I bend steel, on my own time, at my own temperature. And it holds up roofs full of people who'll never know my name, and that, finally, is enough. Though I'll keep building anyway, long after they've all learned to ask the right question. Because I was never doing it for the asking. I was doing it because I'm good, and because something I make today will still be standing when every dinner table silence is dust. I hung up the phone and went back to the bench, and the metal was right where I'd left it. Glowing, ready, waiting for hands that knew what to do with it. For 10 years I kept the proof in a drawer and let them keep their silence, and I used to think that silence was something happening to me. It wasn't. It was a choice I kept making. To hand them a folder of certifications they never asked to open. To sit at that table and finish a sentence nobody wanted to hear. Nothing in my family changed because I begged for it. It changed because of what I built when no one was looking, and because of how I carried myself the night the lights finally found me. That's the part I want you to take with you. The stair didn't show up under my sister's wedding by accident. It was there because 6 years earlier I'd signed a lease I couldn't afford and welded beads at 2 in the morning when it would have been easier to quit. Every quiet hour I put in came back around and stood me on that stage. Cause and effect. My mother dismissing me, Sebastian approving my drawings without ever asking who drew them. Those weren't twists of fate. They were the natural fruit of people who refused to look closely. And the night it all came apart for them, it came together for me, for the same reason. I'd done the work. If there's anything worth carrying out of this, it's 3 things I learned with my hands before I ever learned them with my heart. The first is that you keep your word to the work even when no one's clapping. You show up, you do it right. You don't cheat the weld where it won't be seen. Because the integrity of a thing is built in the places no one inspects. The second is that you stay sharp enough to build your own shield. I put a brand name on my door, so the work would be judged before the maker was. And that one clear-eyed decision is what let strangers, and finally my own family, see me. And the third is the plain stubbornness to bend without breaking. 10 years of being told I was less could have cracked me. It didn't, because I learned the same thing about people that I know about steel. You don't force it, you bring it up to temperature and let it move on its own. I didn't force my mother to see me. I just kept the fire honest. And one Tuesday she called to ask a real question. So if you're the one in your family they ask about like the weather, hear me. Don't spend your life performing for people who won't look up. Build the thing. Keep your hands clean in the way that actually matters. Get wise about how the world reads you, and refuse to crack. The respect you chase will never feel like enough. The work you love will hold up a roof full of strangers long after every dinner table silence is dust. Build it for that. Build it, because it's yours.